What's going on, guys? It's Omniarch, and today I'm bringing you a brand new video where I'm going to be giving you my guide to Alexander the Great in Rise of Kingdoms.
Yeah, 24/7, 365. We won't have no problems if my money on time. Did it by myself.
All right, let's crack open the soda. This is a tradition around here, okay? Now, Alexander the Great is a commander that you've seen me talk a ton about here on YouTube and on Twitch. I use him all the time in war for KVK out in the open field. You've seen me spin hundreds of times of his Wheel of Fortune just to get more sculptures of him. So that should give you guys a really good idea as to how good I actually think this commander is, not only for a player like myself, but also for free to play and low spenders. And we're going to talk about why he's such a good investment for that specific type of player. Now, if you don't have Alexander the Great yet, the way that you obtain him is through the Wheel of Fortune. So he shows up in a kingdom around day 206, I believe, and he'll show up for 3 Wheels of Fortune consecutively, just like every other Wheel of Fortune commander. So he's definitely a commander that I would recommend spinning as much as you can for his sculptures, because guys, the specific commander Wheel of Fortunes on average are about, I think it's 600 gems per legendary head. Now, of course, it's a gamble, so keep that in mind, but if you were to do the math based on the probabilities over a long period of time, I think it's around 580 to 600 gems per legendary head, which is some of the best value. That's some of the cheapest you can get a legendary commander sculpture, and sculptures of Alexander are incredibly good because Alexander himself is just so amazing. So we're going to talk about that later, but if you guys haven't gotten him yet, at least summon him, right? But he is one of those commanders where I would recommend investing a lot of gems into that wheel once it does come around, if you can, obviously, if you have the gems, if you can afford it or whatever. With that being said, most of the time the first legendary that people focus on as a free-to-play or low spender, or even as a big spender, is Isong Ye, right? And that means that if you were super active in Rise of Kingdoms, playing every single day and doing every single event and playing as smart as you possibly could be and saving up all of your sculptures, you could probably expertise Isong Ye in 200 to 250 days, depending on how active you are, again, right? So what that means is that Alexander's going to show up on his wheel right around the time of you finishing up your Isong Ye, and that means that he's a great commander to focus on next. They're a great pair, and I think that Isong is probably a little bit more valuable to your everyday player out in the open field, because he's just so good at so many things. But I think Alexander is a close second as far as value that you get for legendary commander sculptures that you invest. So if you're wondering, who do I expertise after Isong, I think if you went with Alexander, that would be a really solid pick. Let's talk about Alexander's talent trees. He is an infantry, versatility, and attack commander. So what does that mean? Well, the versatility tree is useless, but he has a single build for the talent trees in the infantry and attack tree that we're going to talk about, and there's some very small tweaks that you could do to it to make it, you know, micro optimized for exactly what you're going to be using him for. But in general, they're like 98% of his talent build is pretty much set in stone, in my opinion, and I'll show you guys that later. Let's talk about his skills. Okay, Alexander the Great is he's amazing in the skill department. Okay, his first skill is called Shield of the King, and actually let's read the unexpertise version. Okay, basically he gains a shield that lasts 4 seconds and absorbs a damage factor of 1200, and at the same time will put up a smaller shield for 2 seconds to a nearby ally with the smallest percentage of troops remaining, with a damage factor of 600. So that one lasts 2 seconds. It's a much smaller shield, but what we're seeing here is the exact same shield strength and duration as Charles Martel, but instead of getting this this damage bonus here that you get with Charles Martel, what you're doing is you're supporting a weaker ally in the open field, and that weaker march could be your march, right? You can buff your own marches with this, assuming that your march is the one that has the least amount of troops remaining. But what's important about this is that we're already seeing Alexander doing more than one role, right? We're seeing a little bit of tankiness with the shield, and we're seeing a little bit of support there. So let's keep that in mind and move on to his second skill. Now, this goes without saying, but you want to max that first skill before you move on. Okay, you absolutely, this first skill, get it to 5 and then bring him to 2 stars and leave him there because his second skill called Lead the Charge is incredibly good as well. And it says, while on the map, troops led by this commander are immune to all damage reduction debuffs, and their normal attacks have a 10% chance to deal an additional damage to the target damage factor of 1700 and reduce its healing effect by 30% for 5 seconds. This skill is crazy good. Okay, we have to dissect this a little bit. First off, you can't reduce the amount of damage that Alexander's army does, right? Whether he's primary or secondary, the army that he's a part of, their damage reduction, you can't apply that sort of debuff to his army, which is insanely good, because as Rise of Kingdoms gets older, just as a game, the devs are getting a little bit more creative with what they can do to commanders and how they can make the latest greatest commander even better than the last, aka power creep. But the one of the ways that they do that is by implementing all sorts of buffs and debuffs and things like that. But Alex is somebody that you don't have to worry about his damage getting debuffed because of this skill. Next, he has a 10% chance of a single target damage factor of 1700, which, let's just take a look at Genghis Khan. His damage factor 1700 as well, and that's his active primary skill. Now I know that this is sort of apples and oranges, right? Because this is a passive skill with a 10% chance of popping off, but keep in mind, this is every normal attack that Alexander gives has a 10% chance to pop this off. So what does that mean? Well, each normal attack takes about 1 second, right? So that means once every 10 seconds approximately, you're going to be dealing a single target damage factor of 1700, which is pretty much the same amount of time that it takes for your first active skill to go off, right? Now if you have a rage engine, over time you're going to be popping off skills faster and faster than 10 seconds, but again, that's just an average, and the skill, you know, there's a little bit of randomness involved, but the amount of times, what I'm trying to say is the amount that this is going to pop off isn't that much less frequent than Genghis Khan's active skill, or just an active skill in general. Maybe Khan isn't the perfect example because he does have an insanely good rage engine, but regardless, this is going to pop off more often than you think, because you see that 10% and you think, oh, that's a low chance, but in general this is going to happen pretty often. And then finally, if you hit a target like Richard, then it reduces his healing effectiveness by 30% for 5 seconds, which makes him insanely good for something like the Ruins fight in Light versus Darkness season 3 through season 5, or however many they continue to do that, which is amazing, right? Because that's a commander. Richard is a commander you see a lot in that Light versus Darkness, the fight at the Ruins, right? And so this healing effect is a counter to somebody like Richard, but keep in mind, lots of other commanders do healing as well. Cao Cao does healing. You remember that? He does healing on his 4th skill. We also have somebody like Constantine. He only heals once an hour, but if you're able to time that, like, dude, that would be super savage. There's other commanders that heal, like Joan of Arc, right? There's a lot of healing involved in this game. The biggest one though is Richard, and this is a counter to that. So all of that being said, we've only talked about his first 2 skills. His first 2 skills are so good, and that means Alexander as a 5-5-1-1 commander is absolutely viable and something that you can do as a free-to-play or low spender. But Alexander is so good as a commander that I do recommend eventually you probably want to expertise him, and we'll talk about why. His 3rd skill, Frontline Commander, says while on the map, infantry units led by this commander gain 30% increased march speed and increased attack. Dude, 30% of attack is crazy. The march speed is a bonus, and this is going to make him a really fast infantry commander. Pairing him with Martel, that's expertise, they're going to be zooming, man. They're going to be flying across the battlefield, which is really crazy. And when you really think about it, what that's going to do is, a lot of times the downside of infantry is they get swarmed and bogged down with march speed reduction effects like Cao Cao and things like that, or Baibars, right? What this is going to do is just make it a little bit easier for Alexander to get out of those traps, and that's going to ultimately save you a hospital bill. Now, of course, the 30% attack bonus is crazy good because it's just, he's going to deal damage, right? He has a ton of attack stats. His 4th skill adds on to that, right? It says when not shielded, troops led by this commander gain 40% attack. When he's shielded, he gains 30% defense. Like, dude, that's crazy. We're talking about when his shield is down, he has 70% attack buff. Like, what? That's crazy. And when his shield is up, not only is it absorbing damage, but he gets 30% defense, which is a stat that he's lacking, because besides that, he's relatively squishy for an infantry commander. So his all 4 skills, what we have to look at here, right? All 4 skills are battle skills. They all apply in PvP combat. That's not something that you can say for all commanders. Look at Cao Cao. This right here, a barbarian skill. Look at Ethelfled, right? She also has a barbarian skill. You look at even Minamoto or even Martel. Martel has a garrison skill. Even Yi Seong-Gye, a garrison skill. Look at Constantine, a garrison skill. All 4 of Alexander's skills are battle ready skills, which means that he has just one more skill than a lot of other commanders that is going to be applicable in the open field, which is really, really good. The other thing we have to point out is that 2 of his skills only work while he's on the map. So while he does do a lot of amazing things, he can't be a garrison commander. Anytime you see an Alexander as a garrison lead, that is a mistake, right? Because he's losing his 30% attack, he's losing that single target damage factor, he's losing the damage reduction debuff, the immunity to that debuff, he's losing the healing effect reduction. You don't ever want him in the flag. But if he's on the map, all of his skills are applicable. Let's look at his expertise before we move on. Essentially what this does is he has the same shield for the same duration and the same smaller shield for your ally also for the same duration, but on top of that there is an AoE area around Alexander where up to 3 enemy troops in that area take 30% increased damage for 4 seconds. So this is another example of a support trait that Alexander possesses, right? So not only is he shielding an ally, he's also making the enemy take 30% more damage for 4 seconds. That's crazy good. So all of his skills are amazing for PvP as long as you're fighting in the open field on the map. So what does that mean? Well, this is an excellent commander for free to play. Why is that, right? Why is that? Well, who's going to be leading rallies, right? It's going to be your T5 whales who have max tech and amazing commanders and amazing gear. Who's going to be the captain of your garrison? It's going to be T5 whales with amazing commanders and amazing gear, right? So what does that leave free to play? Well, that means that free to play's job in war is to join rallies, join flag defenses, and where possible they should have presence in the open field to prevent the enemies from reinforcing their rallies or their flags. So one of your roles as a free-to-play player is to fight in the open field, right? You're not going to be leading rallies or defending flags, but you're going to be fighting in the open field, and Alex has 4 amazing skills for doing that. And even if he's only 5511, he still has an amazing amount of versatility out in the open field, dealing damage. He has a shield for a little bit of tankiness, and he's supporting all of your allies by giving them that shield, reducing healing effects. There's a lot to love about Alexander for a free-to-play player. Now, what if you're a mega whale? Well, guess what? Alexander Yi Seong-Gye is a rally pair for season 2 of KVK. Alexander Yi Seong is an exceptionally good pair as long as you hold the open fields. You could even do Alexander Charles Martel as a rally combination as well, and I think I even have some of the reports from when that happened. This is what happens when you rally with Alexander and Charles Martel, right? You see that the players that are swarming this rally are getting absolutely obliterated, and that's because Alex and Charles, well, Alex as a rally leader, it has all of his skills on the map, and Charles has crazy amount of stats that he's offering for infantry, but also his damage bonus on his primary, and his counterattack damage is crazy. Plus, when Alex is swarmed, he gets a ton of rage in his rage engine, and we'll talk about that in a talent. So you can lead rallies with Alexander either with Martel or Yi Seong, depending on what you're looking to do. Now that's primarily for, again, season 2 of KVK. Once you hit season 3, that's when Attila Takeda comes out, and that's like the meta, right? So you pretty much like you're basically pigeonholed into doing that, because whoever can do that the most is gonna win. With that being said, let's talk more about his talents. Okay, this is the talent build that I am currently using for Alexander the Great. You can see I made my way all the way up to elite soldiers. This gives you 7.5% of infantry stats, which is amazing. I made my way over to the strong of body, which gives you 6% health, something that Alex really needs because he mostly is buffing his attack, which leaves him a little bit more vulnerable. We also grabbed effortless for a maximum of 10% damage dealt increase after the first 40 seconds of fighting, although it does go up incrementally every 10 seconds. So as the battle goes on, the longer it goes on, the more damage you're going to be doing, which is great. You also reduce the damage you take with armored joints. Now there's a couple things you could change. This is my favorite build, but you could take the 3 points out of fleet of foot, which gives you 6% more march speed, which again I like because it can help you prevent your hospital from feeling faster by being able to leave engagements that aren't favorable from you for you. But you could remove these 3 points, and you could also remove this 1% for defense, and you could grab something like fight to the death. And what this is going to do is increase all your damage by 6%, but increase damage you take by 3%. That's kind of more of a all in on offensive. I just don't really like paying my hospital bill, so I don't really go for this, but you absolutely could if you're more of that type of player that's just very aggressive. Or if you know for certain that your Alex is only ever going to be paired with somebody like Richard or Martel who don't do any skill damage at all, you could easily come over here and grab Martial Mastery, which will increase your normal attack damage by 6%, but decrease active skill damage. But guess what, you're not going to be doing any of that with those commanders anyway. Now if we talk about commander pairings, you could absolutely pair Alex with somebody like Sun Tzu or Yi Seong-Ye, and in those instances I think this talent here is actually detrimental to you, so I wouldn't recommend grabbing that. But again, if you're only ever going to be using Richard or Martel with him, or somebody else like maybe Joan or whoever, as long as they're not doing skill damage, you absolutely could grab that as well. It's up to you. Like I said, for me, this is the build that I choose because I like the march speed, I like the extra 2% of stats here, and the other stuff in here is a little bit more min-max conditional. If you wanted to go and grab things like this, or even if you wanted like unyielding, you I guess could potentially do that. I don't know, but this is the build. You can change it slightly if you want to, but I think this is a really solid place to start when you're leveling up your Alex. And a lot of times Alex is going to be your primary commander because of his attack tree here. This Burning Blood gives you 6 rage every time he's attacked, which means that if you're being surrounded in the open field, you're suddenly going to get a ton of extra rage. And this is one of the reasons why Attila is such a savage in rallies. It's because you can't swarm Attila Takeda, because what that means is its active skills are going to go off like crazy once you do, and you're just going to get completely obliterated by that combination, right? So this kind of applies here for Alexander as well. Burning Blood is amazing as a primary. Now if you want more tankiness, then you could put him secondary and put a primary like Martel or Richard, for example. But let's talk a little bit more about some of the other pairs in depth, right? So just going down the list, Alexander primary, Ethelfled secondary, definitely something you could do. You probably have better choices, but if you're free to play or a low spender, then Ethelfled is absolutely going to give you a really nice half circle AoE, which is crazy. You're going to want to bring like a couple of archers and cavalry, just a very tiny amount, and if you do that, then you don't want to grab this top talent here or anything that only happens if you have full infantry, so keep that in mind. But you could pair these two together theoretically if you wanted to. I guess maybe you would want Ethelfled primary, actually, now that I think about it, because then maybe you wouldn't want the infantry tree. Anyway, this is a pairing that you could do because AoE, solid damage all around, good in the open field. Having Alex primary is going to pretty much make it so they're not going to want to attack you as much as seeing an Ethelfled in the open field. But again, keep that in mind. That pairing specifically is actually one of the only pairings where this build will not work, because you do want the extra damage from this skill here, right? The 20% increased attack. More traditional pairings though are obviously Richard, and we already talked about this. Richard provides the tankiness and the healing that Alexander is missing. So Alex is all in on doing damage, on supporting your allies in the open field. Richard is all about tanking damage and healing your troops, and so perfect synergy with these two. Amazing combination, right? Sort of the same thing with Charles Martel. Although Martel doesn't have the healing, he does provide another shield, and the shields don't stack perfectly. You'll get about 6 seconds of shield time instead of 8 seconds total, right? Because they're 4 seconds each, but the way that they pop off, it's really only 6 seconds total. That's just how the game works. But you get a lot of stats that you wouldn't otherwise get, because mostly you get attack from Alexander. You get defense and health, plus you get a ton of counterattack damage and the increased damage bonus with the active skill here. I love that pairing. Isong, another insanely good pairing. Again, we talked about the rally combo here with a primary Alex, Isong secondary. This of course would be a full infantry rally, and really it's only for season 2 basically, of KVK. But you could do this in the open field as well, to basically, if you get surrounded, then you're gonna get a ton of rage from your Alex being primary, and that means Esong is going to rain down on those surrounding you, which is awesome. You also could pair with Constantine. This is going to be sort of the same reason that you would pair with Richard, right? He gives you attack reduction of 40%, reduced damage taken by 10%. You get 40% infantry health, which is absolutely something that Alex needs, because he doesn't get any of this from any of his other skills. Plus you get a major healing factor, and when Constantine gets a shield, skill damage taken is reduced by 10 or up to 40%, and that's a big deal, right? That's crazy good. You also could bring Joan of Arc along with him. I think Joan is better paired with somebody like Richard or maybe Martel, right? But you absolutely could do an Alex Joan of Arc if you wanted to, if that was some of the only options that you had, and you just wanted a really supportive infantry march that you didn't think would get attacked. That's something that you could do. Of course, Sun Tzu is the guy. You could pair Sun Tzu with pretty much anybody, but especially with Alex, because he gives you 10% health. He also reduces damage you take by 10%. He also has a rage engine and some nice AoE, so I really love that with Sun Tzu. I think that's a really great pairing as well. Beyond that, you could do Ulji, because he does give you 30% stats. He also, if he's surrounded, like, he will pop off with this last skill, and he has a little bit of a defense reduction on that primary. There's some cool things about Ulji. If you're a free-to-play player or a low spender, then maybe this is a pair that you could consider in the open field. But obviously, if the enemy sees an Ulji, they're probably going to swarm this army down pretty hard. I don't know, it is what it is. You could do it. Now, of course, you could also pair with somebody like Guan Yu. The thing with Guan Yu, Alex, is that it's a little bit squishy for an infantry march, in my opinion, but you do have the 3-second silence. You do have an AoE damage factor of 2000, which is crazy. That's assuming Guan Yu as primary. There's a lot to love. There's some more march speed and an attack bonus in here as well, and Guan Yu does benefit from getting a shield, but I don't actually know how that works. If Guan Yu is primary and then Alex pops his shield, is Guan ever gonna pop off a skill in that 3-second window? I don't think it's possible, but let me know in the comment section below if I'm wrong about that. But anyway, those are the main pairs for Alexander. I think Alexander is just overall an amazing commander. Now, if we're talking about gear, I did make a video talking about after the latest update, some of the best infantry gear progression that you could go through. This is the gear that I normally use on my Alex in the open field when Alex is fighting PvP, but right now I have it set up as my Canyon team because I'm not really doing too much fighting, and so Richard is my primary for the Canyon team, but this is the gear that I use on my Alex. A lot of this is focused on infantry attack, right? There's attack here as well, so keep that in mind, but check out the infantry equipment guide if you want more information about that. With that being said, guys, if you found this video informational or useful or entertaining or anything like that, hopefully you will drop a thumbs up on the video. It does help out my channel a ton. I'm not just saying that, it really does. And of course, if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that bell to be notified the next time that I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. As always, my social media links are in the description below, so make sure you follow me over there on Instagram, Twitter, my Discord, and as well as Twitch, where I do live stream Rise of Kingdoms. And finally, there's a link in the description below to download Rise of Kingdoms absolutely for free for your PC or your Mac. It's a program called BlueStacks, and you're going to experience fewer crashes than if you were to play the same game on maybe an older phone. So like I said, it's absolutely free. You have nothing to lose by clicking the link down below and giving it a try. It's my favorite way to play, as you can see the cursor on the screen. So if I love it, maybe you guys will love it too. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.